Now here I just got my new case for the camera, and just because something's new doesn't mean it's always going to work right. Just to be sure, I loaded the case with fishing sinkers and I tossed it in the rain barrel and left it sitting on the bottom for an entire day to make sure it didn't leak, and it checked out okay, so the project went forward. Now what I'm doing in this segment is I will take you through the concept for an underwater vehicle that I designed from the original drawing to the first test dive. A little bit deeper. Here's my original scribblings of the concept drawing of the underwater vehicle or sled or whatever you want to call it. It's just simply kind of an arrow-shaped contraption balanced with weights so that it will track nice and true and take underwater photos. So the logistics of building this thing, first of all, is based on a type of fishing gear called a bolly rig, which I have used for years for deep fishing. And the line comes down from the boat, goes into the eye, which is located at the balance point of the contraption. Now the sinker that drags the thing down is on very weak fishing line, like about 5-pound test. And the reason for this is if that ball sinker should hang up on something underwater, you just pull on it good and hard and the line will break and you lose the sinker, not the very expensive camera. Now weights had to be added to the front under the camera to make the thing balance. You want the balance point fairly far forward so that the tail fins stick out a much greater distance out the back than the camera does out the front. And this is to give the tail fins the maximum leverage to keep the thing tracking straight and true. Now, I'll show you a couple more things in the concept of building this contraption, what it really looks like. Here I am sitting in my office designing parts, and basically I'm cutting fin templates out of cereal box cardboard. This thing's got to be small enough to operate out of the cockpit of a kayak. Now this particular design that I'm holding was scrapped, just way too bulky. Saves a lot of sheet metal when you do that. A lot cheaper to use cardboard. Here's the completed rig hanging on the garden gate, one of the garden gates. And as you can see, the pivot point is very far forward, the balance point. The small ball sinker of 1 pound underneath the camera is strictly for balance. The one that really drags it to the bottom is on the long line underneath the pivot point, which the rope is attached to. That's the balance point. And they are both on 5-pound test fish line, so if they do hang up, the balls will break off and you just lose the balls and not the very expensive camera. I made this totally from salvage material, but I estimate that if you had to go out and buy the material, it would cost about $15 excluding the solid gold camera. Here we have the unit sitting on the outside fabrication bench, and in this picture I have the camera pointed sideways for a side scan. I figured this will be useful for examining the various reefs, rocks, and naturally occurring walls that are abundant in this area. And the camera can be rotated 360 degrees to look in any direction. The up-down angle of the camera is also infinitely adjustable, from looking straight down at the bottom to level to even looking straight up if you want to do that. Now in the near future I may add a little clip in between the fins that I can hook my homemade fishing lures to, and just to examine the action and get them adjusted just right and really turn them into killers. Here's the unit sitting on blocks again with the camera in the forward scan position, which I figure will be the most common one. What I learned on the test dive was I want the camera pointed at a bit more of a downward angle to give a little bit better pictures. Here I am at the State Park Pier getting ready to give the unit its final test, just for tracking. That's all this is for. Here's her christening at Jarl Cove State Park, putting it in the water for the first time. The function of this test is just to tow it along the side of the pier and make sure that it tracks true and smooth and doesn't go wiggling around like a giant fishing lure. All I had to do was adjust the trim tabs just a wee bit to make her track absolutely perfect. So now the final thing to do is for me to put my money where my mouth is. Let's take her out in the boat and let's take her down deep. Here we go. Okay, we are in the middle of Pickering Passage off Harstine Island and getting ready to take her down. Over the side we go. This is going to be pretty uninteresting bottom here, but just for the test dive I didn't want to go too far from home. Naturally, I wasn't sure how things are going to work. She's going down to a depth of about 35 feet. The passage gets deeper at the north end and the south end, but most of the stuff that I'd really want to look at is within the top 20 feet. So 35 feet's a nice test dive. Down and down and down, just barely starting to see the bottom. Coming in for a landing. There's a sea anemone there. Boonk. Get leveled out. Come on, level out. Here she goes. Now I could have had it a little bit closer to the bottom, and like I say, with the camera pointing at more of a down angle. And here I'm kind of drifting around, getting a feel for the current and a feel for the line to see what I'm doing. Lots of sea lettuce algae, but not much else. There's another sea anemone. The sea anemones that are in these swift current areas like this grow very short with no long stalk like the ones we looked at earlier. That's so they don't not bend all over the place in the currents. And the usual plankton storm. Now we're getting leveled out and gliding above the bottom. Here's another sea anemone. The currents in Pickering Passage are very swift. There's a sea anemone and a great big multi-armed starfish and a regular starfish around a group of boulders, which is natural for life to be around there because things hide in the cracks between the boulders. Another few small boulders. The usual pink starfish, which can explode to plague proportions around here. Just cruising along. Now there's a big multi-armed starfish digging a hole in the bottom, and this is blind luck that I happened to hesitate here while I was getting a feeling for the current, because I can't see down there. You see, he's dug a pretty good hole in the bottom going after a clam or something down there, most probably some kind of clam. More sea anemones. And another multi-armed starfish. Now these multi-armed starfish grow to horrific size around here. Now, there's one with a sand collar now, which is the egg mass of the moon snail. I don't know if he was going to eat that or do something with it or what. Anyhow, the multi-armed starfish around here grow to massive sizes. I have seen quite a few of them much larger than a garbage can lid. Monstrous things. Yeah, we're just kind of cruising along. Like I say, very uninteresting bottom, but this is just a test. Okay, now it's time to come back to the surface. And we're rising up. Coming back up from 35 feet down, this pretty much concludes our test dive. I hope to have better footage for you as the year progresses and the creatures come back from the deep, and I also take this thing into much more interesting areas. You can almost see the boat up there. We're coming back up. I think in the upper left-hand side you'll see the boat. Could be coming up here pretty soon. There it is. And we're back to the surface again. Well, it's Rocky from Harstein Island, signing off.